Welcome to the ChiroSphere podcast, where we talk about all things chiropractic and some things not so chiropractic. I'm Dr. Ray Foxworth, founder and CEO of ChiroHealth USA. Today, we welcome Dr. Bobby Maybee to our podcast. Dr. Maybee is the president and proud member of the Forward Thinking Chiropractic Alliance, FTCA. One more acronym in chiropractic. Since his days as a student, he has been uneasy with some of what is passed off as chiropractic and understands the concerns shared by the public and the medical community. Driven by a passion for empowering chiropractors nationwide, Dr. Maybee is dedicated to helping patients receive the right care to relieve pain and live healthier, more active lives. Through his work with thousands of DCs, he is making a meaningful impact on the profession and patient outcomes. Today, we're going to explore Dr. Maybee's journey, his mission to advance evidence-based care, and his vision for the future of chiropractic. Welcome, Bobby.
Thank you, Dr. Foxworth. As the kids say, let's go.
You bet. And just so everyone knows, we had so much fun on our first podcast that we're doing it again. The problem is you'll never hear the first one because the damn thing didn't upload. So
It was the best podcast ever recorded to never be
it
released.
was, there's an old saying, to err is human, but to really screw things up, you need a computer. So I always like to dig in at the very beginning. People that end up in chiropractic, sometimes it happened by chance, sometimes it happened by other means. What sparked your interest in chiropractic, and how did your early experiences shape your approach and move you towards, while we really need to be looking at more evidence-based type care versus, like you said, or like has been said, some of the things that cause some angst for those of us in the profession?
Simplest response to that, the short story is I'm a veteran. While I was in the military, I had an injury and was referred in the hospital to physical therapy. And while I was getting care in physical therapy, I thought, man, this is awesome. This is such a cool thing, because when you're young in the military, a lot of times you're trying to decide, am I going to stay in and be a lifer, or am I going to get out and do something else with my life? And I thought, wow, this would be a really cool career to pursue, physical therapy. And I got to talking to the physical therapist, and when you go in for however many hundreds of visits they put you through, he said, you know what? PT is cool and all, but right now there's nothing cooler than being a chiropractor. I would look into that, which, in today's parlance, that's a little odd, you would think, but this was the late 90s, and chiropractic was, the Mercedes 80s and the late 90s. Chiropractic was the place to be as far as healthcare. And in that time, I started following around chiropractors, shadowing them, asking questions. This little small town that this military base was on, I went to as many chiropractors as I could, saw the successful ones, saw the ones that were, maybe open 2 or 3 days a week and seen a few patients. So I knew there was a big disparity, and there's a big disparity in how practices are run and things. That I got tons and tons of advice to don't do this. You're crazy. Don't get into this. And despite all that, I knew that it was the right place for me to be. Actually, ironically, for those that are, if you haven't been in the military and you don't know, like at the career, the business office, basically where you would get your paycheck and they would process your employment type of stuff, whatever that office is called. I don't know what it's called anymore. You could take an aptitude test that would tell you what careers would be best suited for you. And I took that once, and chiropractor was number one on the list. And I thought, that's silly. That's just that this has got to be some sort of setup, So I'm going to go back in there and I'm going to take that test again. And I'm going to be as honest with my answers as I possibly can, because I think I was already skewed towards the PT type stuff. I'm just going to be honest. What do I really want? And it showed up number one again.
There you go.
And so in the GAO, or however they assess careers and whatever, chiropractic showed up. No idea of what the political environment was inside the profession. No idea of what the sort of the struggles with skeptics and things of that nature outside the profession. Just that you could take care of people, you could help them, and you could operate your own business.
Well, first of all, thank you for your service. Much appreciated. Want to make sure we touch on that. It was interesting when I went to chiropractic college, and this is 1980 to 85. I had two physical therapists that were part of our class. And the reason that they chose to go to chiropractic after their PT degree, well, to sum it up, they said they got sick and tired of getting referrals of patients to them with treatment recommendations when the doctor clearly didn't understand the neuromusculoskeletal system. And so they got frustrated being under the thumb of the medical community, because they're recommending, inappropriate treatment and care. So they wanted that autonomy that we enjoy so much. So let's fast. How long have you been in practice now?
We've hit the 20-year mark.
20 years.
So I
What's the biggest
survived.
change you've seen in your 20 years? Biggest positive change you've seen in 20 years?
Biggest positive change is it's pretty easy to have conversations with most other professionals. They kind of know where you're coming from and what you're trying to do. There's still plenty of doo-doo heads out there. Like there's there's even one in my Masonic lodge, a physician is just like, I would never talk to a chiropractor and it's like, that's fine. But there are three other guys in the lodge that would, and we're not talking business in here anyways. It's just like, they just have this ingrained
Yeah, they drank the Kool-Aid
premonition.
from the yeah.
Yeah. And this,
Right.
this particular guy comes from an old school MD family. Working in a multidisciplinary environment, being able to communicate with peers across professional boundaries has been a lot easier for sure.
I love the saying, "Some things only change one funeral at a time."
Right.
So,
Right. Well, they would say that early on in chiropractic school too. Like, the dinosaurs will eventually die off, but it doesn't happen like that.
yeah,
So I guess we've had this image of the dinosaur, like some sort of meteor crashing and all the dinosaurs falling at once.
yeah,
Like, no, they also make little baby dinosaurs, and
they do.
it takes time.
So I know you are I guess the founder of the FTCA. Tell me what what drove you to put that group together? How did it begin initially? And did you ever envision it having, what do you got, 10,000, 11,000?
11,000, yeah. Yeah.
Wow. So take me through that journey a little bit.
Well, it's serendipitous on some levels, but so let me put this retrospectively. So now, currently, in the Oregon Board of Chiropractic Examiners, I serve as the peer review committee chair. So what the peer review committee does in the Oregon Board of Chiropractic Examiners is whenever there's a complaint that is levied towards a doctor that needs a peer opinion on whether they're behaving appropriately for what a chiropractor should do in their career. Like, they're documenting appropriately, the patient care plans are appropriate, are they following regulations, are they doing vital signs in the first visit, simple things like that. And then the peer review committee would deliver some sort of opinion on whether this doctor is behaving up to the bar of what we would expect for chiropractors. The folks that seem to get in the most trouble in the chiropractic profession are the ones that practice on an island by themselves, without input from peers, without input from their professional organizations, because they're on an island. They don't participate in those things. Um, Serendipitously, I felt like I was on an island by myself when I first started practice, because I was in a multidisciplinary clinic. I was the DC, and then we had MDs and PTs, and you can name it. We had it in this clinic, so I was pretty much alone in a small town that really had chiropractors that were already insulated themselves and older. I was the youngest guy on the block, type of thing. And so, it comes from a feeling. It was feeling alone, and it was a social media thing. It was like, I don't have anybody within my area. I would have to drive 2.5 hours to meet another chiropractor just to have coffee who thought and practiced just like I would. Let's start this. In social media, this is probably so FTCA has been around for more than 10 years. So we're talking 2012, 2010. Social media back then was still dominated by the straight chiropractic folks as well. So there was no like evidence based place to have a conversation. And so we created this group, and it was just for a couple friends so that we can keep talking to guys from school and people we've met along the way. And then eventually they would add another friend and another friend, and it would go from like 20 people to 50 to 250 to 1,000, all the way up to what it is now. And it was specifically designed for the fact that we felt like we were alone and there was no one else to talk to who sort of practiced like us, air quotes.
I shared with you when we did our initial run of this podcast. My mom and dad were both chiropractors, and they opened their practice in 1967 in Yazoo City, Mississippi, and you couldn't even get a license to practice chiropractic in Mississippi then. And that they if it were not for the camaraderie that they had with the people, that were in driving distance, they would get together at least once a month. And it wasn't just to get together for a meeting. We got the families together. So I grew up with other chiropractic kids, and it really was, uh, the back then version of social media. It was a way to stay connected, and everybody shared. If somebody was having a great success with something, or, you know, uh, whether it was financially, whether it was in process, whether it was whatever they were doing in their practice, they were so open and willing to share with one another. And the saying goes, rising tide raises all boats or all ships. If somebody was struggling, they weren't hesitant to bring it up and to kind of get that collective mind to say, "Hey, I was in the same place. Here's what I did. Here's what I tried." I, I won't fault our educational system, but I think it's a result of our educational system in chiropractic. We're actually taught to be an island,
Yeah.
because even going through chiropractic college, back when I went through in the '80s, um, we never really collaborated with anyone else. We did our own exams, we did our own X-rays, we did our own blood work. We really didn't have that interprofessional relationship with anyone. And so how else could you feel except like an island? So kudos for you for putting the group
I
together.
think it's become even worse at this point. I think it's become worse, if you can imagine that. I think the schools, and once again, we don't want to fault the schools. They're doing, what the market demands and what's best, what they think is best. They are definitely teaching intra-professional collaboration with other types of professionals, physicians, PTs. That's the step they've taken. Is we do need to have communication, and we do need to be inclusive on this very large scale, but they've also omitted, like you said, the interprofessional collaboration. So each one of these doctors, not all of them, but many of them, come out of school and they are their own island trying to attach themselves to a different continent. And they totally eschew the chiropractors and they start talking with everybody else, which is just, it's the environment we're in now. And I think it does the profession worse, because you do have these conversations like, how many times do you refer to other chiropractors? And it doesn't happen often. Now, we did create in the FTCA, we created this professional referral map. So we have a map on our website. If you go to the website, forwardthinkingchiro.com, there's a map. I think there's probably about 500 or 600 folks on the map total, um, throughout the globe, really, but mostly America, Canada, Australia. And you can look up somebody that, you know,
Like-minded.
like-minded ish, right? Because we're
Ish,
none of
yeah.
us are none of us are like-minded.
Yeah.
Um, and you can make a referral to another chiropractor, or you could give them a call and say, "Hey, I got this patient. What do you think about them? They're moving to your area, or they're going to be there for the summer because they're snowbirds or whatever." And that's been a very powerful tool, because not only has it created business for other chiropractors, but it's created health for patients that have needed help when their chiropractor couldn't help them as well.
We talked about this on the first stab at this as well. In all the years that I practiced, if someone was moving to another area, it was a challenge for me, and I'm a chiropractor, to try to find someone that at least practiced in a similar fashion that we did. And so, can you even imagine what it's like for a patient who moves to a new area? Um, because our profession hasn't evolved into specialties like the dentists do. You might go to somebody and they don't even do adjustments. They're all nutrition. You might go to a chiropractor thinking you're going to get spinal manipulation, and they're doing functional medicine. It really is the luck of the draw. So at least
Totally.
having some semblance of similarity or thought is a step in the right direction. And you know, I do hope at some point we do evolve to where it's okay to be a chiropractor and to be focused on structure. It's okay to be a chiropractor and focus on nutrition. It's okay to be a chiropractor and focus on whatever your brand or style of chiropractic is. But I hope we get to the point where, for the public's benefit, that we can identify, here's what I do, you know.
It's the biggest disservice to all patients. It's the biggest disservice we put out there to all of the communities we serve, is you never know what you're going to get when you go in.
Confusing. It is
I
confusing.
mean, you could have a bad product. I'm not going to say medicine is a bad product, like family practice general medicine isn't a bad product, but you kind of know what you're going to get when you go in there, right?
You bet.
And even if you're satisfied with it or not, you still at least know what you're getting.
Yeah, you're not walking into the unknown. Whereas, like I said, it's a luck of the draw sometimes in our profession. Oh, you have worked within a multidisciplinary type of practice, and you just shared the guy at your at the Masonic Lodge is an MD who doesn't talk to chiropractors. When you went into that environment, and for doctors that are considering that type of practice, what advice would you give them on how to overcome maybe some of the skepticism or, you know, misinformation that's out there?
Well, I do think I kind of got it lucky in the multidisciplinary place that I fit in, because the doctor was an internal medicine specialist who was already sort of on the outside of the medical system. He is running his own private practice. It was a cash based medicine practice. He had already worked with chiropractors in the past who had done a good job. So somebody had paved the way for me in the past by doing a good job. And you know, going to the college I went to, University of Western States, which was Western States Chiropractic College at that time, the Harvard of all chiropractic colleges, uh, and working in a hospital in the military too. So we can't take that away from it either. I already spoke the language. I already worked with physicians. I already sort of knew the language, and there was still the discussion of business that needed to happen. So not only, for this family physician who was running his own private cash practice, did you have to speak medical language of what you were trying to accomplish with the patients and how it benefits the patients, but you also had to talk business, like how this can actually benefit the practice itself. Um, and in our case, when you're working with MDs, I like to say try to outline with whoever you're speaking with what their number one challenge is in their practice. And for an MD, like, what do you not, what's your favorite thing to deal with as far as patient caseload, and what things do you not like to deal with? And you're looking for the physician who does not like to deal with musculoskeletal complaints, but gets a lot of them, and they're everywhere. And you can take that burden off of them. But in this case of negotiation, it was, I can take the burden off of you, these musculoskeletal cases, but we can still keep it in house so you don't lose all of that revenue from the patients coming through.
Yep. I've shared with you before that my practice was part of a multidisciplinary group. We had 13 MDs there: neurosurgery, orthopedic, physical medicine, rehab, PT, OT. I mean, you name it. It was one-stop shopping for spine care. And in that type of model, you really do have to learn to speak a language that's maybe a little bit different than ours and what we might use amongst ourselves. And um, but if you're willing to do that and communicate with words that they understand, um, man, it makes a big difference. Trying to get them to, and well, let's just throw it out there: the subluxation complex. Love it, hate it, whatever it is. That language is not well understood by the medical community. And so if that's the language that you're using, not only are they already a little bit skeptical about chiropractic, but when you're talking about things that they have never ever heard about, it does make it more difficult. And you know,
Well, look, we both got blurred out green screens or whatever, but let's be
okay,
honest, there's a 800-pound elephant in the room too. Most chiropractors don't even understand the subluxation complex.
well, there's that too. uh, but and I've had, when I started doing this type of practice, I mean, I had some of my own colleagues just really bash the hell out of me.
Sure.
No, Ray's sold out. He's working with the MDs. He's sending patients for epidural injections. And what kind of damn chiropractor is he? A busy one. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but if you're not willing to get outside of your comfort zone and have those conversations and understand that you need to communicate in such a fashion that they're familiar with, then it's a little easier to make that happen. Otherwise, it's like, can you imagine landing on an island and there's a tribe there, meaning the medical community, and you refuse to get involved with them because they don't speak your language?
Yeah. They're
Probably the
going to
better
point.
thing to do is to learn their language and then explain to them what you do. But you got to start with something that they know and is familiar. Otherwise, I mean, you're literally speaking a foreign language to some of them.
Yeah. They'll boil you. They'll boil you and eat you alive. Um, you know, the actual irony that happens when you do this and you cross that bridge and you speak their language and you speak as a team player, not as someone on an island that wants to take stuff back to your island. I started saying things that the physician was like, "Wait, what? Wait, what? I never heard of that. I never heard of the term proprioception. Why are you? My patients come in and say you're training their proprioception for what? What is that? And, the fancy word for balance, basically. It got to the point where at the end of our run together, me and this physician, before I went off and started my own practice, he would tell people that I was the best diagnostician that he had ever met. And he's an internal medicine specialist. And it's like you can wake them up to a tremendous amount of genius that they have no idea exists when it comes to assessing the human body. But you have to do the work first and show some success and play the game. Yeah.
Yep, no doubt. Well, hang tight, everyone, while we take a quick break to hear from our sponsors. Welcome back to the podcast. We're here today with Dr. Bobby Maybee and having lots of fun. That's the second time we've had a lot of fun together. The first one just didn't get recorded. I wish y'all could have heard that one. So,
What did I do different? What do I got to do?
yeah, so
Be more edgy.
we're having a completely different conversation. So you talked about interprofessional referrals and intra-professional, and I don't know what it is about our profession that we don't refer to other chiropractors. Is that something you do in your practice?
Yeah, I've changed a lot. So my practice, I really try to focus much more on just the low back itself. Um, there are occasional times where you have to include the whole spine, the whole body, of course. But if somebody comes in specifically with a complaint I'm not comfortable with, I'll definitely refer them out. And I wouldn't say not comfortable, but just not fitting the flow of what I'm trying to accomplish. So my care, it's just evolved much more into an active care thing. I don't want to be the hero. I'm just the guide. I'm Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're the Jedi. You've got to do this work yourself because you have to own it. Pain is not something that we remove. We're not magical healers. Yeah, I've learned this now because of my own low back disc issue that I've had. Like, oh, I used to know a lot and do a lot and talk a lot, but I had no idea what I was talking about because I'd never experienced what it actually feels like to go through this agony of a chronic disc pain that, with the anxiety and never knowing if it's ever going to go away. It's a lifer. It's a life sentence. And you've got to teach people how to overcome it on their own. They can't just keep coming in to see you over and over again.
That we, like I said, you got to own it because it's going to be with you. So what advice would you give to chiropractors who want to transition to a more evidence-based type of practice? What things do you read? What resources do you tap into to keep you up to date and informed?
So that's the thing. It's not like, so we have this thing in chiropractic. Maybe this conversation will get interesting now. We have this thing in chiropractic where we think binary, like you're either evidence based or not.
Yeah, it drives me.
Yeah. And I know people who call themselves evidence based or claim they are, and they are way off their rocker. Not even close. Like it's more of a spectrum than a binary thing. And And I don't think you want to be truly, purely 100% evidence based. I think you got to have some intuition. You've got to have some experience. And sometimes you got to take a shot with different patients because they all have different presentations. I definitely do not approach every patient the same every time. Some patients need a brother, some need a friend, and some need a drill sergeant, you know? And there's no evidence behind any of that. That's just all experience, clinician experience, which is part of the three-legged stool of the evidence-based approach, right? Is the evidence itself, your clinical experience, and the patient's expectations. If you want to be more evidence-based, just read stuff. Just read, ask questions, get curious. The caveat there is a lot of folks in our profession do not have the base understanding skill of what it means to read a paper, a journal, constructively and be able to sort of parse it out what's nonsense, what's BS, and what is actually sort of legitimate. You know, they'll see some self-produced, self-published, poorly designed study that justifies something they already believe in. And they'll be like, see, you do throw salt at people's face and it helps with their arthritis. Because that paper right there says it. Like, what are you talking about? I just made that. I don't know if you throw salt at people's faces, but throw it
I,
over your shoulder. But
yeah,
so the critical appraisal has to happen, and once you understand how to critically appraise things, go for it. Read things, try things, but there's no such thing as evidence. I think evidence informed, but but you know, I'm certainly not a straight chiropractor. Um, and I wouldn't even call myself necessarily evidence based, evidence informed. I think you're a loser on both ends. Well, I think your patients lose on both ends.
yeah. I think anytime you go to the extreme in any direction, I prefer the term. I mean, really, what you're talking about is learning best practices. If I want to have the best outcome for this patient, based on, like you said, based on the information that's out there, based on my experience, and again, the patient expectation, what's the best way to approach this case? You know, my issue with hardline, we only do evidence based stuff is,
You
well,
don't, you can't.
is this, tomorrow's evidence says this, and it's entirely different. And so I mean, it'd be like being whipsawed back and forth if you're only going to do what the literature says is done. And then the other conversation that I have with folks is, you know, when we talk about evidence based, there are varying levels of evidence, and one of them is anecdotal. And to say, well, I shouldn't do anything that's anecdotal. Well, if there's enough patients that you've seen that you know when you do XYZ, you get this outcome, hopefully in time, whatever that is, does get into the hopper, so to speak, to where at some point maybe it is considered evidence based and there is enough research. And, you know, and that's one of the things that we are a strong supporter of research. And
Yes.
some chiropractors say, man, we got enough research about chiropractic and back pain. No, we don't. We have we've got a hell of a lot more than we used to have. But the realities are all policy, healthcare policy, reimbursement policy. You know, if you aren't willing to be involved in research and support research, and if you don't like your reimbursements and the way the medical policies are written, then don't get involved in research. But if you want to see those things change, you got to be willing to invest in that. So over time, maybe what wasn't what we thought was just anecdotal evidence does turn out to be something that can be supported by research. Just a sidebar, uh, we have supported the Clinical Compass for years and years. I used to serve on that board. And so, docs, if you aren't looking at anything else, go to the Clinical Compass website because these are your fellow chiropractors who are working to try to distill what all is out there and then do some knowledge translation. You know, here's what the literature is saying. Here's how it can apply to your practice. So, at least that's a good resource to tap into.
Yeah, I serve as the Oregon House of Delegates representative for the state of Oregon. did I say that right? The American Chiropractic Association's House of Delegates representative for the state of Oregon. So when you meet with your congressmen and senators and you're trying to get something like Medicare reform passed, sometimes they're just like, we're on board. We're totally pro Medicare and pro chiropractic. We're going to co-sign this bill. But then every now and again, you have somebody who does not want to be a co-signer for whatever reasons. Usually they're financial reasons. Um, Sometimes they're just,
It wasn't big enough, Bobby.
yeah, the check wasn't big enough, things of that nature. But so in my state of Oregon, there's only one person who's not one representative who's not a co-signer on the Medicare reform bill. So I had never met this person. Finally, I get a meeting with them and I go, what's the deal? Like, I'm not, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir. Like, I just walk in the office and go, what's the deal? Why are you the only one? Well, I don't see the evidence. Where's the evidence of efficacy, cost savings, and all this? No, well, here's the evidence. You just throw clinical compass at them. You can throw anything you want at them. Um, and the fellow was like, well, I want research from outside of the profession that says the same thing. Well, I'll find that for you too. The evidence is there, and you can change people's minds using it, but not if you don't support these organizations, because without clinical compass, without like Duke University research, without some of the things that are going on within the VA, none of those conversations could happen.
No doubt about it. And kudos to the organizations in the profession like NCMIC and many others that actually do support research heavily. And part of the chiropractic strategic plan that we're very heavily involved in, one of the pillars of that is making sure that we've got research that allows us to go and affect public policy and advocate for better reimbursement, better access for patients. This crap of having a gatekeeper who doesn't know their, pardon my French, ass from a hole in the ground about musculoskeletal care or proprioception. Having them as a gatekeeper for chiropractic is lunacy. You know, uh, having medical policy where you're having to play Mother May I for 4 visits is sheer lunacy. And the only way you're going to change that is with data. I mean, it just is. So we can stomp our feet and have a pity party if we want, or we can realize that we need to be taking steps to beef up the research because that is what's going to drive policy, reimbursement, and access for all of us.
Well, this is a profession, so professions have a wide range of different people in them, and some of the people within this profession are doofuses. Now, they're not listening to this podcast because, once again, they live on an island. They don't get information from anybody. They just, it's one of the reasons, it's one of the archetypes for becoming a chiropractor is I get to be the king of my own castle. But some of those kings are the doofus kings, and they're not listening to this podcast. They don't care about research. They don't care about investing in the future of the profession. They don't care about any of that stuff. I would at least ask those doofuses to acknowledge the fact that the people who do, the Clinical Compass, NCMIC, the Forward Thinking Chiropractic Alliance, Chiro Health US, like these people that are at least trying to move things forward are also doing it for your benefit as well.
Yeah.
So that you can stay on your island and be sort of aloof to everything that's going on and still get paid to do what you do. So, it's like, have a little respect, for what's going on and at least participate a little bit so that you are enabled to be the king of your own island like you want.
Yeah. I had this conversation earlier today, but I think it bears repeating. We have been involved with the chiropractic strategic plan from day one, and it truly was based on a survey of what the profession wanted, not our elites in the profession want. And I mean, when's the last time you saw 4,000 chiropractors respond to anything? And it's an hour and a half, up to 2 hours to be able to complete that survey. It really was a deep dive. We had hired an outside organization to gather the data, analyze the data, and that's really what laid the groundwork for the strategic plan and what we're trying to accomplish. And the bottom line is, we're advocating for the profession for better reimbursement and better access for patients and getting some of that crap out of the way that are basically barriers to care. And a barrier to care can be, pre-authorization, pre-cert, It can be the gatekeeper, any number of things. And, the more we can do to eliminate that stuff, the better off we'll be. Bring me to the second point. When I talk to chiropractors, there are things that they are upset about over the years that quite frankly haven't changed in 50 years. And the reason they don't change is there's a saying that if there's no money, there is no mission. And you can want to change things, but if you don't have the wherewithal to go change it, which often boils down to dollars, it's never going to change. And my one of my frustrations is I think every doctor ought to be a member of their state association, a member of their national association. But unfortunately, we have, depending on whose numbers you read, we have about 75% of the profession that are not a member of either national association, and about 50% don't even belong to their state association. And so, docs, if you want to keep getting what you're getting, keep doing what you're doing. That was part of the birth process of the strategic plan. Was a lot of the profession is frustrated with the lack of progress, how long it takes to get things done. But the reality is, it's simply because we don't have enough shoulders at the wheel. And I say this every time I get the opportunity. This strategic plan thing is not a competitor to ACA or ICA. God bless everything you guys are doing, everything ICA is doing to moving the profession forward. But we've got to get engagement from the 75% that might be frustrated with the direction or lack of accomplishment that we've experienced, and understand that it's because we've sat on the sidelines so long, or so many have sat on the sidelines, that we simply can't get done what needs to be done. So put your shoulder to the wheel. And if you want to be the island, great. If you don't want to get involved in politics, great. At least support those who do. Nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something. So, go look at the strategic plan, join your state associations, and help those that are really trying to help you practice the way that you want.
I think that's well said. I think the big part of that is the profession can tell us all the things they want, and of course they want better payment and easier access, but who is going to tell them what they need to do in exchange? What are you willing to give up for it? What are you willing to do for it? Man, I'm really exhausted with these like insurance company audits, and then they want money back for what I've done. Are you willing to actually document appropriately and let them know in code and bill appropriately? Or, what are you willing to do in exchange for what you want? Kings on their own island they don't ask that question. They just collect the taxes from the serfs.
So, what's your vision for the profession that you see? If you could change one thing in chiropractic in the next 5 years, what would it be, Bobby?
Mentorship for all young people, because they're well intentioned. They really want to do the right thing. They believe in this profession and helping people through the profession, and the ones that want the guidance often don't have it available to them. It's usually hidden behind a paywall, right? And so helping these young folks get off to successful careers is probably the best thing we can do for our whole profession. Because at the same time, while you're making someone successful, you can impart these important lessons to them. Like when you go into, speaking as someone who belongs to a Masonic lodge, there's an initiation process in all fraternities and sororities. When you go into medical school, it's like joining a fraternity or a sorority. There's an initiation process. When you become a physician, you will talk this way, you will walk this way, you will act this way, you will dress this way. There's expectations. There's no initiation process into the chiropractic profession, where if you become a chiropractor, you will walk, talk, act this way. You will participate in your professional organization. You will participate in your community in some sort of charitable fashion. You'll be an upstanding individual, blah, 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 blah. If we can raise successful people and tell them that those are the expectations of success, it changes the face of the profession tremendously.
No doubt. Early on, I was given a book written by Dr. Fred Barge, like him, hate him, whatever. But the book was called "Are You the Doctor, Doctor?" And
Oh yeah, I've heard of that one. I've never read it, but I've heard of it.
Yeah, and it really was an attempt to help a new doctor assumed the role and the mantle of becoming a chiropractor, a chiropractic physician. And it's an old book, but man, still a lot of gems in there.
Hey, I don't begrudge straight chiropractic or like that's not even straight. That's classic. Those are classic chiropractors to me. Like I will read Barge. If anything was put in front of me, I'll read it. I think where we have, if you want to say, if there's like a fight between evidence based and straight or whatever, the fight is the unwillingness, like the heels that are dug in the ground of like you refuse to accept anything new as far as information is where the anti-intellectualism or pseudo-intellectualism that happens with straight chiropractic versus having a real intellectual conversation about what we're trying to do with our profession. That's where the trouble comes from. But you can read BJ Palmer. Obviously there's thousands of nuggets of gold there. I used to follow Leander Eckert around like nothing because that guy could move a bone, you know? And like there's no begrudgment on the human beings that we stand on the shoulders of those giants. There's no begrudgment on those guys because they were thinking, they were trying to move something forward with the information they had. So why not take the information we have now, geniuses of the straight chiropractic world, and move the profession forward even more instead of trying to hold it back for your own personal whatever gain or success or belief system.
Yep. So I've got some just for fun questions.
Let's go.
Who's your hero and why?
My hero, Dr. Wayne Dyer, is the father I never had. Not a perfect man by any means, but whenever I had trouble, just sort of learning how to be grounded and grateful for what was going on in life, he always delivered, always delivered. And I got to meet him at Parker seminars too. So.
What talent do you have most people don't know about?
So last time when we did take one, it was hard to explain orienteering. So as an outdoors person who fishes and hunts and hikes and all that, even in the middle of the night, for some reason, I do not get lost. I kind of always know my direction.
Very good. What's the worst job you ever had?
Worst job I ever had. I lasted at Jiffy Lube, I think, for 2 weeks. So right after I got out of the military, right before college started, I just took whatever the first job I could get was, and it was a Jiffy Lube, and I lasted about a week or two.
Well, you just found out something you didn't want to do the rest of your life.
That's right. That's right. I've done a lot of things, but
Firestone store.
Well, they don't stop. They keep dragging the cars in. They keep bringing the cars in. It's like, yeah.
Well, thanks for spending double the amount of time with me on the podcast today. And thanks to everyone else for listening to the podcast. Please subscribe and share the podcast with your friends. Let us know who you'd like to hear from in the future and what topics you'd like us to cover, and I'll do our best to get them on. Doctors, if you offer discounts of any kind in your office, you need to ensure you're not breaking state and federal rules and regs on dual fee schedules, inducements, and anti-kickback violations. Those can lead to serious fines and penalties. As a member of ChiroHealth USA, or in the family, we call it CHUSA, we can help eliminate these concerns by using our profitable discount strategy. The strategy ensures that any discounts you offer are 100% compliant and, most importantly, profitable. You can't discount your way to success. It all starts with a no-cost, no-obligation phone call to find out if we can help you, like we have thousands of other doctors nationwide. Most of our doctors, or many, have seen a 20% increase in their revenue and a 50% retention of patients who are part of the network. Over the last 17 years, 7,000 chiropractors have helped over 4.3 million family members get the care that they need at a cost they can afford. So if you want to increase your revenue, retention, and practice with more peace of mind, call us at 888-719-9990 or visit our website at chusa.com. That's CHUSA. To find out why ChiroHealth USA is the network that works for chiropractic in you. Thanks so much, Bobby. I had fun both times.
Thank you, Doc. Keep riding. You're the man.
We'll do it.